Welcome to the Clemson Insiders on the Beat show. I'm Will Vandervoort. We wrap up the regular season, or I guess it's kind of technically the postseason, but I can't remember. Clemson just plays an ACC Championship game. We're just so used to calling it regular season. So anyway, but with me to close out our On the Beat for right now until we get closer to the bowl game, William Quackenbush from WCCP The Roar, Clemson Sports Network. Clemson women's basketball play-by-play guy, Clemson baseball play-by-play guy. Did I leave anything out?
Fifth quarter show.
Yeah, that's right.
I serenade you when you're mad in traffic.
And I always told Quack not to do too much when he was a young college student. I'm glad he took my advice.
It didn't work. You were talking about regular season. I have a hard time being like, okay, so in 2020, in 15 games, how will such and such play? Like, I just take it for granted. If the regular season is the season where you do what you regularly do, then you can make an argument that this is a regular season game.
Exactly. That's why it kind of like, I just said it. I didn't even think about it, that this technically is the postseason, or it's the championship phase, as Dabo likes to say. This is now that stretch where they're playing for something. He said it started with South Carolina. They're playing for something every week. They're playing for a trophy. And this week, against the Virginia Cavaliers. And I tell you, I've been following Virginia all year long. I've always figured this was the team Clemson was going to play. Give me your early thoughts on Mr. Perkins and the Cavaliers from what you've seen from them this year.
Well, there are a couple things. First of all, I picked Virginia Tech to win last week. And the reason I picked Virginia Tech to win is because I basically was faced with an impossible choice between, it's like, the unstoppable force and the immovable object. The two unstoppable forces and two immovable objects were Virginia Tech always beats Virginia, and the Coastal will always be chaos.
Yes.
And it was down to, is Virginia Tech going to beat Virginia for the 93rd consecutive time, or is the Coastal going to have a different division winner exactly once in 7 years? Literally every team winning the Coastal once in a 7-year period. 7 years, seven winners. Which ridiculous nonsense thing is going to come true? And Virginia won. And so that was the nonsense thing, and I should have known that the Coastal decides.
I went with the Virginia was going to win to go with the nonsense because I figured that was going to happen. Because it was just too good of a story not to happen. Yeah. Plus, to be honest with you, I thought throughout the season Virginia was the more consistent team. And I thought playing at home, Perkins, his last game at Virginia's home state in that game, and playing at home for the last time in his career. I just think all those things, and I thought they're good enough on defense to cause problems and good enough on offense to answer anything Bud Foster would do, which is what they did. It was a weird game plan. I don't think you can see Brent Venables do this. Their game plan was to stop them from throwing the football, and they allowed them to run it. And you saw Perkins went for 164 yards. And then that allowed the passing game, because I thought it was an interesting game plan by Bud Foster than what he had been doing the previous few weeks.
Virginia Tech, just in the way they do things, because, Bud Foster's going to run robber coverage predominantly. Yeah. He's going to run that anyway. You're going to have a lot of bodies in the box. What that does is it's going to create a one-on-one matchup between whoever your spy is in that system, whether it's a safety or linebacker or an end, and the quarterback. And so the quarterback's going to read that. And when you play the type of coverage that they play, your corners are turning and running. And so they're back into the quarterback. Dabo even talked about that last week. I guess today he talked about it. Mm-hmm. When you're facing a quarterback with that type of athleticism, which I would say he's a runner less like Deshaun Watson, wiggle in space.
He's more Woody Dantzler.
He's a little more like just shifty, and he gets to the spot. It's a little... I almost see a little Cam Newton in him. Not that he's going to bowl you over, but that he's shifty in a slow way, if that makes sense. Like, he's going to make people miss, but he's not making you miss like Lamar Jackson, where he's spinning and cutting and doing.
Right.
It's a little bit like Woody in that way, where Woody would just get to a spot.
Woody would get to a spot and do his magic, and this guy does magic too. You think, how did he just get out of that? And he's not like super fast. He's fast. Like Woody was fast, but he wasn't super fast.
Right.
He's not like Michael Vick or Lamar Jackson that are just super fast.
So you're going to see Clemson, and Dabo even had a part of his press conference today where he talked about the need to play, when you play man, to have some zone principles in there. And what he means by that is you're going to get guys with their back turned, running with receivers down the field. Virginia's going to do that. They're not going to burn you deep in the passing game probably, but they're going to run guys down the field, try to flood the secondary, and create mismatches and uneven boxes and try to create opportunities for the quarterback to run. And so Clemson's going to have to be sound in the box defensively because with the RPO game, with the quarterback run game, you have to be disciplined.
Right.
To me, it sets up really well for Clemson because one thing that you're not going to do against Clemson is you're not, unless you're a freakish athlete somewhere, which some of those exist in the country, but not really in the ACC. Unless you're a freakish athlete, you're not going to win the matchup you want. So like all offenses are designed now to create one-on-one matchups and then just go at it. Mm-hmm. Like the NFL, you try to move guys around, create matchups. Clemson did that against South Carolina. They wanted matchups in the slot. What do? They moved Higgins and Ross in the slot.
They moved guys around. Had the matchups with the safeties.
Right.
Yep.
It started in the Georgia Tech game. You could see. What I said about Jeff Collins at the Georgia Tech-Clemson game was their offense got the matchup that they wanted. They got the one-on-one, but the problem is you're not beating Isaiah Simmons.
No.
You're not beating Skowski. You're not beating Wallace. You're not beating Muse. You're not beating Turner. You're not going to win against those guys. So what Clemson's going to have to do, as long as they're sound and they tackle, they'll be okay. Mm-hmm. Because here's what Virginia's not, okay? Virginia's not a team that's going to line up with two backs and run the ball.
Nope.
See, coming into the year, that's what I thought they might do. Two backs, pound you in the, punch in the mouth, pound it down your throat. They're one of the worst running back run teams in the conference.
That's why you stop the run, because you make them one-dimensional and they have to that's why it's so interesting what Bud Foster did, because I thought, just pound them, make them third and long every time. Then I got them where I want them, as opposed to they said, well, if you're going to give us the run, we'll take the run, and that's what they did. Because he's playing pass, and like you said, he had his guys running downfield and backs against him. And I agree with you. I don't think Clemson's going to do that in this game. I think Clemson's going to play what they do. They're going to play that zone scheme that Venables likes to play. You're going to see a three-man front probably a lot, and you're going to make sure Isaiah Simmons is paying attention to Bryce Perkins. And they're going to blitz from all different angles and come from different angles, and they're going to have to make him make quick decisions, whether that's to run the ball quick decision or throw the ball quick decision. But one thing they're not going to do is be able to run the ball with the running backs.
That's right, and so it's going to be the Bryce Perkins show. I mean, look, they beat Virginia Tech by the skin of their teeth, and it took a 400-yard, one for the ages, heroic performance from a singular player. Mm-hmm. Now,
475 of their 488 yards. With some Bryce Perkins.
You think about that. Clemson, as a defense, needs to lock on one guy. Because last year, they had a great receiver in Olamide Zaccheaus who created a lot of problems for people. They could put him in the slot, they could put him in the backfield, they could put him out wide, they returned with him. They don't have that type of player. They've got a couple of really good athletes in there, but I don't see that Zaccheaus player that could, I don't know if he led the league in targets last year, but he was among the 2 or 3 leaders. I think Kelvin Harmon was up there from NC State, and there were a couple others in there, but he was one of the top targeted guys in the league last year. In addition to the stuff that he did elsewhere, they ran a lot through him. Without a guy like that that's a go-to player for them, they kind of just have to move the ball with Perkins as best they can. That's why their offense has been susceptible to short drives. I looked this up because Clemson has only allowed 20 drives this year of 4 or more minutes. Virginia's top 10 in the country in time of possession. A lot of that, though, has come in particular games. For instance, in the last 2 games, Virginia has failed to have a single drive of 4 or more minutes, but they've got like 30, 32, something like that through the year. So in specific games, they've been able to control the clock. There are times where they hadn't. And really in the last 2 games against Liberty and against Virginia Tech, they have scored points while being explosive and not being on the field a ton. To me, Clemson getting them off the field is going to be critical in this game. Because if they stay on the field, what that means to me is you've got Bryce Perkins using his legs, scrambling around, either getting the first down with his legs, breaking a tackle, or he's finding an open man in a very, what I'll call in a way that may bring back some bad memories for people, in a very Connor Shaw manner, somehow finagling 6 yards on the 3rd and 4,
right? Where
you got him stopped at the line of scrimmage or in the backfield. That's the way that Virginia's got to move the ball, and it's very particular. It's a little bit like what North Carolina was able to do.
That's what I was about to say.
Nobody has been able to do that against Clemson.
Yeah, and that was the key for North Carolina. They had to play perfect. They had to control the ball and keep Trevor Lawrence and those guys on the sideline from getting any kind of rhythm. The thing that's funny about that, though, is when you look at Clemson, as explosive as Clemson is and the big plays they get, and we saw them the other day, Clemson is averaging over, 32 minutes time of possession per game. So Clemson's got the edge, for the most part, on their opponents when it comes to controlling the ball themselves, which is interesting when you look at all the big plays Clemson has. But late in the game, Dabo turns it off, and he plays ball control, and he gets the other guys out there. And I know that's probably where a lot of it comes from. But in this game against Virginia, you're right. Got to get them off the field because this is a game where they're going to want to control the clock and the time. You know, Bronco Mendenhall is not going to, he's not going to go and say, okay, guys, let's try to match these guys point for point because he knows he can't. So the only way they're going to equalize this is time of possession and then turnovers or something of that nature. That's the only way they equalize this game. But I want to say this before we change gears here. With Virginia, Bronco Mendenhall, to me, outside of Clemson, and I said this 4 years ago when he took the job at Virginia, I said this was a great hire for Virginia because I've always respected what he did at Brigham Young. Mm-hmm. When you watched his old Brigham Young teams play, you knew two things were going to be. They were going to play sound defense, and they were going to be fundamentally sound as a football team. In other words, they really try not to beat themselves. There's not many penalties, and if there is, he gets those guys off the field pretty darn fast. Their players are always in position to make plays. And so when he went to Virginia, he started changing the culture there and doing the same thing. When you watch those early Virginia teams he had, those first 2 years, which weren't very good, but their players, you would look at their players and they were always in position. Now, they couldn't make the plays all the time because they weren't fast enough or they just weren't athletic enough. But they were there in position to make plays, and that was coaching. You knew as soon as he started getting some good athletes in that you were going to start seeing an uptick. And I think you're seeing it. I think this is a program that Clemson's going to see for the next few years. This program's not going away. And I think you're just seeing the start of what they're going to try to do there. I think they're going to be contending for that Coastal Division Championship often. And Clemson, I think, is going to see them playing in that championship game pretty often.
Well, particularly the rivalry of Virginia Tech. I'm going to be really fascinated to see what Virginia Tech does because they've now found Hendon Hooker, which I think is a great answer at quarterback, has really revived them and maybe saved Justin Fuente's job there. What does Georgia Tech do under Jeff Collins? It's going to take them a few years, but you can see that kind of building a little bit after some stagnation after a couple years. North Carolina and Sam Howell.
Sam Howell's going to be good.
And here's the thing. Virginia Tech and North Carolina may be a little bit similar in what they're trying to do. I think North Carolina may be a little more with that air raid influence with Longo, and Virginia Tech more of a what Dabo would call a power spread. It looks a little more like a Clemson offense with Fuente, that TCU offense that was really good from a few years ago that he was a part of, and then the offenses at Memphis. It is going to be interesting because the one formula that's really different is Virginia's because of the defense, because of the emphasis on the box, because of the emphasis on not beating yourself. This is a team in Virginia that, again, they haven't run the ball great this year, and they've turned the ball over a lot. They've committed a few more penalties. They have some aspects to them that you don't associate with a Bronco Mendenhall program, that you wouldn't associate with a team that's going to be based on possessing the ball and things of that nature. But they're building that way.
And they overcome them.
Yes,
similar
they do.
to what Clemson did with Dabo Swinney early in his career is they don't want to do these things. This is not how they do, but they had some of these, but they would figure a way to overcome those adversities they'd give themselves. That's what Virginia did this year. I mean, they were left dead to the wall. They were left for dead after they lost that second conference game. They lost 2 out of 3 games, and everybody's like, okay, Virginia's done. And then what'd they do? For the first time since 1951, they went 4-0 in the month of November to win the Coastal Division. That's impressive to me.
Yeah.
That tells you the culture he's got there, because in years past, Virginia just would have laid over and died.
Well, think about this really is impressive. After they lost Bryce Hall to injury in that Miami game. If you got a team that's made up of a lot of like 3-star, low 4-star type prospects, developmental prospects, and you lose an All-American.
He's your best player on the team.
You're going down. In that Miami game, within the game, they did not lose the game because of defense. And in the subsequent games, they did not lose because of defense.
Correct.
Their offense needed fixing. They were able to plug that gap with Bryce Hall. It would have been easy to say, Virginia lost 2 out of 3, like you talked about. Well, you lose Bryce Hall, what do you know? But they were still, allowing teams to score like 20 in the teens and just losing a game. Then they take the field with a team like North Carolina, and they're going score for score, and you're going, okay, wow, they fixed the offense. Now the defense a little wonky. They have figured it out because without Hall, they do have major glaring issues on both sides of the ball that they haven't addressed over the course of the year. They're unable to address over the course of the year, and yet they found a way in each individual game to win. It kind of reminds me of an NFL team. Going through a season where 1 week you might have your entire offensive line's hurt. The next week, half your secondary's hurt. The next week, your defensive line,
sounds like the
best
Pittsburgh
defensive
Steelers.
line is out there. Right. Look, the Colts are on their 9th, 10th, and 11th wide receivers, okay? And they cut Deion Kane, so I don't know what they're doing.
He's now playing for the Steelers and doing well, so thank you, Indianapolis.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, the point, and I'll get off that point really quickly. The point is, that's what it feels like, where every game it seemed like Virginia had some uphill battle to climb, whether it was a personnel or a schematic disadvantage that they had, and they were able to do it. That's how you know they're well coached.
Before, what do you think the score's going to be, your prediction angle? Because, unlike Kelly, you're not doing the Tiger pregame show, so you can throw out a score.
Oh, yeah.
Kelly, gave a nice tease last week, even though everybody knew who she was going to pick. So for you, what do you think is going to happen in this game?
This is championship phase. I think the weather's supposed to be decent. It's not going to be raining the whole time like it was last year.
It'll be a beautiful day, it said during the day, yeah. Cold.
I think it's going to be like 45 to 7 or something like that. Yeah, I just think props to Virginia, great season. How are they going to win? If it's not Bryce Perkins, how are they going to win? And Brent Venables is not a dummy. I'm not saying Bud Foster's a dummy, but you said that there were some issues with
that was an interesting
the scheme. Brent Venables, because of how multiple he likes to be and how multiple Clemson is, he will scheme to get Bryce Perkins out of the spotlight.
Yeah.
He will push him to the corner and make somebody else beat him. And there's not one player on that Virginia team that Clemson needs to fear. Now, you need to respect them because there's some guys that can break a play here and there in the special teams game. You get them on the ground. They can be inventive at times with their play calling and formations, a little bit of that NC State, Pittsburgh type deal where they can leverage you in weird ways. But in space, this Clemson defense closes so well. They don't get beat down the field much at all at the cornerbacks. You put them in one-on-ones. Their safeties are so good. They're so disciplined up front. It's hard to win matchups. And so even if you get what you're looking for offensively, you still got to break that tackle. You still got to beat that guy. And oh, by the way, you block this guy, but not for long enough, and now he's tracking you down from behind. There's just too much. If you don't have elite athletes, you're not going to be able to score on Clemson. And then I think Virginia's length at the linebacker is a problem. They run that a lot of 3-4 looks, can be odd front. And those two, the 6'5" and 6'7" on the outside.
That number 14 is pretty darn good.
Pretty doggone good.
He's like an Isaiah Simmons, not totally developed yet, but you can see he could be a pretty darn good player.
Jordan Mack won the, I think it was a Scholar Athlete of the Year award from the ACC. So
they got some studs. They got some studs on.
Even without Bryce Hall, they do not give up a lot of big plays.
I think this is the most. When I look at this defense, I think this is the most fundamentally sounded defense Clemson's going to play. In other words, they're not going to be out of position in a lot of things. They're not going to bite on some things we saw South Carolina do. Like, when Higgins makes that, he fakes the post and then runs to the out, then South Carolina bid on it. And I don't think you'll see Virginia do that as much. I think they're too well coached, if you will.
Yes.
And I think that's where we're going at here with, they got some athletes. I think they're well coached. I think Clemson wins this game too. I don't think Clemson wins it the way they've won the last 7 weeks, though. I don't know if they're going to cover the spread. I think in 35-10, somewhere in that range. I think they still win comfortably, but I think this is a game where you'll see Trevor Lawrence play all 4 quarters. You'll see Travis Etienne play all 4 quarters because I just think Virginia, they're too well coached to get beat 55-7 and stuff like that. They're just too well coached, and they're not as banged up as some of the other teams Clemson's played. Clemson's still more superior. And I think Clemson will win the game easy, but I don't think Clemson covers that 29.5-point spread, which I think is a little too high. And to be honest, a little disrespectful to Virginia, too.
It'll be interesting to see what Clemson does because if you remember, we just talked about how smart Virginia is. And some of that stereotypes, like when you think of Virginia, you think elite academic institution, really smart people, I get it. North Carolina had a really smart defense, and they confused the heck out of Trevor Lawrence. They confused the heck out of Clemson's offensive line. Now, that's not going to be a road game, and it's not going to be 190,000 degrees, and there's not going to be other things.
It'll be the exact opposite. It's going to be really, really cold.
So I don't think we can expect a North Carolina 2.0, but I do think it's interesting to see, okay, you've got another bite at the apple with a defense that's going to scheme in an intelligent way to try to throw you off and confuse you. Can you win your matchups? Can you pick up protections? Can you get a clean pocket and make some throws? The Trevor Lawrence we've seen the last few weeks can do that. If the Trevor Lawrence shows up in North Carolina or the offensive line that freaked out against North Carolina shows up, then Clemson may be in a dogfight.
And I think this is the best game for Clemson as a tune-up for the playoffs because they're going to get Virginia's best shot, and they're going to get a shot against a very well-coached football team. And that's what they're going to see in the playoffs.
Yeah.
They're going to. Except the only difference is going to be those other teams are more talented.
Yes.
That's the only difference. Other than that, they're going to, and it's good to see, like you said, to see the scheme for Trevor, to see how teams are going to try to scheme him, how smart football teams are going to try to scheme against him. And so I think this is a good warm-up for Clemson. Like I said, they're the better team. I think they're going to win it comfortably, but it's a good little warm-up, I think, for them.
Yeah, I would agree. I just, the way that Clemson's playing, if they are, and I've been saying this too, we've been talking about Clemson getting respect. To me, I know Dabo's talked about, well, if we lose, we're at 20. Well, in some of these games, if you lose, you probably should be at 20 because you're that much better than the opposition. This is another game where you're better. You're not as better, if that makes sense.
Right.
I know that's grammatically correct, but you know what I'm saying. They're not as better against Virginia as they were against South Carolina and even like really injured Wake Forest and some of those. But you're better than Virginia. You should show that you're better than Virginia and really convince people this week. That's the challenge on the table for them.
And then real fast before we go, I know it's always, there's this time of year, the coaching carousel begins, and the first things we hear are, is this coach going, and they're going to come get this Clemson assistant, this Clemson, and then when we look at, the guys, the jobs that are open, first of all, I was a little surprised BC went ahead and let go of Indazio up there because I thought when he got that win, he had, they went to Pittsburgh and won against a Pittsburgh team that had been playing well, and they figured some things out on defense and actually played probably their best defensive game they had in weeks against Pittsburgh and won that game. So a little surprise there. And then, of course, you still got the opening down at Florida State. The South Florida job came open. Missouri job came open. So there's some interesting jobs that have come open in the last few days. It's interesting what this Clemson staff is going to do. Do you think it stays intact? Just your opinion.
I think last year there was a lot of chatter about, okay, they can't do this forever. Like, come on, somebody's going to, Georgia Tech's going to get one of them or something like that. And I said, I didn't think that either, that any of Elliott or Scott or Venables or Streeter, I didn't think they would take a job because I didn't see one out there.
Mike Reed's now in it.
Now you add Mike Reed to the mix, and I thought the best jobs in terms of fit for those guys were both in the ACC. And you wonder about the coaches wanting to hire somebody off of Dabo's staff, or ADs want to hire somebody off of Dabo's staff. You don't know if you want to do that necessarily, put them in there. And you don't know if you're an assistant, you want to do that. Maybe you want to have a conversation, but you may end up not wanting to go to a Georgia Tech or North Carolina. To me, the job that I'm looking at, with the jobs that are open right now, which is, Missouri, Arkansas, Florida State, Ole Miss, BC.
No, South Florida, sorry.
USF is the one that I'm looking at because it feels like a job that's a softer landing spot and an easier climb back to respectability than a place like Ole Miss, Arkansas, Florida State, Missouri, where they're cash-strapped. You look at what Willie Taggart did at South Florida. He basically got one good quarterback, Quentin Flowers, had like 1.5, maybe 2 good years, and got the Oregon job. Not just a Power 5 job, not just a rebuilding job, he got the Oregon job. That's Nike money in your back pocket. That's the coach of USF for like that long. That's the type of job that is. If I'm USF and I'm Michael Kelly, who's got roots in the ACC, was with the conference for a while, was John Fulmer's right-hand man for a little bit, I'm calling Jeff Scott. That's my first, if not the first, it's going to be second phone call. Because maybe you want Willie Taggart back. That would be the only thing. To me, he understands the recruiting landscape down there. It seems like a good fit for both parties. It seems like a new challenge for Jeff Scott. For Clemson, it's a good time because you've got Brandon Streeter in-house, so you could just move right on into that co-coordinator role. Jeff's daughter's getting to the age where she's going to start school, Savannah. Right. So this might be a good job to go ahead and move and get established somewhere so you're not moving kids out of school and things like that. It's a school that, again, he's recruited Tampa, that area, knows that area very well, has connections. And if you want to be a head coach somewhere bigger, you might have to take a job like South Florida that will get you to that point, can vault you to that point before you end up getting a bigger job. You may not get a job that you really want.
Right.
like a Florida State, let's say, as a coordinator at Clemson, but you might as a head coach at South Florida.
Does coming into fact, though, and we heard Jeff say it this a couple weeks ago when he was asked about the Florida State opening. We heard Tony ask about answer it the other day when he was asked about the BC opening. Mm-hmm. Does it come to a point, though, where they still kind of look at it and say, this is good, yes, but do I want to stay here? Do I want to leave a program that is going to contend for another national championship now, more than likely next year, and maybe they're positioned for another run a couple of years? Because when you look at the recruits they got coming in the next few years here, the number one recruiting class coming in, you know, and you heard Jeff Scott mention this a few weeks ago. Sometimes, you know, he said he paid attention to what when his dad was at Florida State and how that staff stayed together for so long. And he wondered about his dad leaving Florida State when he did, and maybe, you know, left a little too early and kind of learned and watched what happened at South Carolina and learned from his dad a little bit. Do you think that comes into Jeff's mind and to Tony's minds to kind of like, you know, sometimes just staying put is okay because, I mean, they're making $1 million+ a year, right?
Yes.
So it's not like they're not making any money, and they're playing for championships. They got the best players in the country, you know, and they're both Clemson guys, and it's hard to leave home sometimes. And
yeah,
I mean, that's got to play into it too, right?
Yes, I think so, and that's why they haven't left for a job now. I mean, you know, you're not seeing them bend over backwards to try to get their resume in places. You know, it's every job Mike Gundy's a candidate because Mike Gundy's agent's constantly putting feelers out there, you know, because he's just constantly trying to get his name in. They're not doing that, right? And I think part of that's a contentment of being in the professional situation they're in and the personal and family situation they're in, where they like where they live and the area and the ability to raise their family and things of that nature. I do think that at some point, if your goal is to be a head coach and you're at Clemson as an assistant, all of those things are going to be true and you're going to leave. Because I don't see Clemson having a roster in the next at least few years where you say, I don't know if they're going to win a national championship this year. Mm-hmm. You know, so that's going to be true. If you continue to recruit that way, they're going to have to leave with all that stuff there on the table.
But do they leave for a smaller school or just wait it out and leave for the bigger school?
That depends on whether you think a bigger school is going to call. Because a lot of these bigger schools, particularly like, think about Florida State. Florida State is a cash-strapped institution that had to raise money. They got no fans coming to the game. They had to raise money to buy out their coach and assistants. You got a president you're not sure is going to be there that long. You got an AD that you're not even sure knows what he's doing. And yet they're only looking for guys with head coaching experience. Some of these programs have standards that are really, really high in terms of who they hire, and the ones that don't, the ones that might be a South Carolina hiring Brad Scott, you don't know if you want to go there. So building that resume so that, let's say if you're the coach at South Florida, and let's say James Franklin leaves Penn State, and Penn State is all of a sudden looking for a coach. They might not hire, let's just say, Jeff Scott as the offensive coordinator at Clemson, but they might hire him after 3 years at South Florida. So I just think if you want to be a head coach, you're going to have to decide, is this a job where I can either be content, or is this a job where I can get a better job that I like? To me, South Florida, or maybe a Memphis, if that job opens up and there's some movement there with those pieces, because the staff there's in very high demand as well. You know, maybe those are spots where you think you can springboard to a bigger job. I think you leave for one. I don't think you just leave for a head job, but I think you can leave for one of those and feel okay about it.
All right, there you go. We in Quackenbush, you got to catch a plane, dude. I appreciate you coming.
Yeah, man, look, they'll hold it for you.
No, they wouldn't.
Superstar?
They'd leave me sitting there gimping along on the runway. I'll be sitting there limping
I'll
along.
carry you like Byron Leftwich in the bowl game, baby. I'll just be like,
I love it, man. Hey, buddy, thanks for joining us again, and thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned to the Clemson Insider. We'll have more coverage leading all the way up to the ACC Championship game and, of course, after. For William Quackenbush, I'm Will Vandervoort. We'll see you on the other side.